All right, let's dive into a really tricky choice that's at the absolute heart of our modern lives. It's a choice between three things that, honestly, we all want: security, freedom, and privacy. It seems like a simple question, doesn't it? But the answer? Well, it's anything but. Every single time you hear a debate about government surveillance or about data encryption on your phone, what we're really asking is this: can we actually have all three of these things at the same time? Or are we always being forced to pick and choose? You probably remember this. This quote comes from Tim Cook, right in the middle of that huge standoff between Apple and the FBI. The government needed to get into a locked iPhone for a major investigation, but Apple flat out refused. Why? Because they argued that creating a backdoor for the government would basically create a key that could unlock everyone's phone, threatening the privacy and freedom of all of us. And that single conflict, it's the perfect snapshot of the tension we're digging into today. So yeah, this isn't just about one company or one government agency. This is a fundamental dilemma, a real puzzle that pretty much defines our digital age. I mean, we see these fights pop up over and over again. But what if the reason we can never seem to find that perfect, happy balance is because a perfect balance is actually mathematically impossible? That's the really provocative idea we're exploring, and it's based on some fascinating work by a researcher named Zofia Heinl. So let's get right to the main idea. The academic name for this kind of problem is an impossible trinity, or you might just hear it called a trilemma. A trilemma is basically a puzzle with one really frustrating rule. You've got three things you want, but you can only ever have two of them. Economists know this all too well. For example, a country can have money flowing freely across its borders, and it can control its own economic policy, but it can't do both of those and keep its currency value stable. It has to give one up. The argument we're looking at is that this exact same logic applies to these big social values. And here it is, the problem in one simple image. You've got security, freedom, and privacy at the three corners of a triangle. The rule of the game is simple. You can have the two values at any two corners, but you have to completely give up the third one. It's a trade-off, no matter which way you go. So before we walk through what those trade-offs look like, let's just quickly define what we're talking about with each of these. First up, security. This one's pretty straightforward, right? It's all about keeping ourselves, our communities, and our countries safe from harm. And that means everything from physical threats to digital attacks. It's really the bedrock of any functioning society. Then you've got freedom. And for our purposes here, we're talking about what's called positive freedom. So it's not just freedom from being controlled, but the freedom to act, to build things, to chase your dreams without somebody getting in your way. And finally, we have privacy. Now this one's a little trickier. It's not just one thing. It's really a whole bundle of rights that have to do with our personal information. You know, who gets to see it, what they're allowed to do with it, and our right to just be left alone. Okay, so if we can only pick two, what actually happens when we try? Let's play this out and look at the three possible and, as you'll see, ultimately unwinnable scenarios this whole thing creates. All right, first up, let's imagine a world where we decide that freedom and privacy are the most important things, period. We're going to choose to sacrifice security. So, in this world, our personal liberty is absolute and our data is locked up tighter than Fort Knox. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? But here's the catch. What happens when there's a real crisis? If the authorities have zero ability to access information to stop a threat, society becomes incredibly vulnerable. And faced with that kind of constant danger, people would eventually scream for more safety, forcing us to abandon this model. It's just not stable. Okay, so what if we react to that chaos by choosing security and privacy instead? This time, the thing we're giving up is freedom. Now, this is a really fascinating twist. So if our digital lives are 100% private and tech companies refuse to create any kind of access, how do governments maintain security? Well, they have to do it in the real physical world. This means more police on the streets, much tighter border controls, more restrictions on where we can go and who we can meet. So get this. In order to protect our digital privacy, we end up sacrificing our physical freedom. And that leads us to the third option. And honestly, it's the trade-off that we debate the most. What if we just sacrifice privacy for the sake of getting both security and freedom? This is the Apple FBI debate all over again. The big argument against this is that you can't just create a master key that only the good guys can use. As soon as that key, that backdoor exists, it becomes a massive target. Hackers, hostile governments, they'll all try to get it. And if they succeed, everyone's data becomes vulnerable. So the very act of giving up privacy to get security could, ironically, make us all less safe. So if every single choice leads to a world that's either unstable or dangerous, are we just stuck? Well, the paper this is all based on proposes a pretty radical way out of this mess. And here's the really crucial point. This problem is actively getting worse. As our world gets more complex, more digital, more interconnected, the tension between these three values doesn't just grow, it grows exponentially. The path we're on right now is just not sustainable. So what's the solution? The paper suggests we've been looking at the whole problem wrong. Instead of trying to balance this impossible equation, what if we just removed one of the variables? The proposal is to let go of privacy as a core value and replace it with its exact opposite, radical total transparency. Yep, you heard that right. The argument is that if nothing is private, the trilemma just collapses. The conflict between security, freedom, and privacy becomes totally meaningless because one of the points of conflict is just gone. It is a bold, almost unthinkable idea. But what would a world with zero privacy actually look like? I mean, how would a society like that even function? Well, in this theoretical future, if everyone's information is totally open, nobody can use secrets to get an unfair advantage. Malicious plots and harmful plans would get exposed before they could even get off the ground, basically suffocated by social pressure. The entire legal system would have to change, focusing only on punishing harmful actions, not what people think or know. It's a complete paradigm shift, but it would also mean we'd have to totally rethink our social norms to avoid it just becoming a culture of constant public shaming. And that really brings us to the ultimate question. It's a pretty stark choice. To solve this impossible trinity, we might have to completely abandon one of the values we hold most dear. So what do you think? Is a world with no secrets the only way for us to be truly safe and truly free?